In the early 19th century, the study of biology was mostly a massive bookkeeping project. Scientists spent their time observing and cataloging different species, operating under the assumption that life existed in a static, linear hierarchy, with humanity placed permanently at the apex. That rigid order began to crack when a young naturalist named Charles Darwin returned from a 5-year global voyage on the HMS Beagle. He brought back detailed observations of distinct, highly adapted local wildlife that completely defied the idea of a fixed natural world. He formalized those observations in his 1859 publication on the Origin of Species. The text introduced a mechanism for how life adapts over time, built on the premise that all living things share a common ancestry. But his proposal immediately collided with a massive scientific roadblock. Darwin possessed a brilliant theoretical mechanism for how life changed, but the technology of his era couldn't see inside the cell. He had absolutely no way to prove how physical traits were actually stored or passed down. The history of evolutionary theory follows a path of survival, where a structurally incomplete idea adapted to its own glaring errors to become the undisputed foundation of modern biology. To understand how the theory survived, we have to look at the engine Darwin got right. Forget the popular phrase, survival of the strongest. Natural selection strictly means the survival of the individuals most adaptable to their specific environment. This diagram illustrates the first half of Darwin's proposed engine. First is variation. Individuals in a given population are naturally born with slight physical differences. Second is heredity. Variations transmit to offspring. Next, environmental pressure and fierce competition create a strict bottleneck. Finally, selection occurs. Organisms holding advantageous traits slip through, survive, and reproduce, making those specific traits more common in the next generation. Run this continuous filtering cycle over thousands of generations, and populations inevitably diverge. This self-sustaining loop replaces the old concept of a straight ladder of life with a sprawling, interconnected branching tree. The logic of this four-step engine was incredibly tight. The danger to the theory was that the second step, heredity, relied on a biological assumption that Darwin entirely fabricated. Lacking modern genetics, Darwin proposed a hypothesis called pangenesis. He guessed that different parts of an organism's body emitted tiny particles, which then pooled together and blended in the offspring, much like mixing blue and yellow paint to get green. If inheritance actually worked by blending liquids, any sharp, advantageous variation would eventually be diluted and washed out over multiple generations. Without distinct traits to filter, the engine of natural selection would grind to a complete halt. The mathematical correction to this error was being calculated in the mid-19th century by an Austrian monk named Gregor Mendel. Through rigorous plant breeding experiments, Mendel proved that traits are inherited as distinct, indivisible units, rather than blended mixtures. By the 20th century, researchers could finally observe these indivisible units at the molecular level. The discovery of DNA's double helix structure provided the exact physical machinery for heredity, permanently replacing Darwin's broken pangenesis concept. This integration of natural selection and genetics is known as the modern synthesis, or neo-Darwinism, a framework where genetic mutation provides the raw material for selection to act upon. The theory adapted to new data in order to survive. With the mechanical engine fixed, researchers began to question the actual speed of the process. Darwin was a strict proponent of gradualism, the assumption that biological changes occur at a slow, steady, and continuous rate over millions of years. Yet the Earth's crust stubbornly resisted this timeline. Paleontologists repeatedly uncovered massive geological eras in the fossil record, where species remained completely identical, showing absolutely no physical alterations. To account for the fossil data, researchers proposed an update called punctuated equilibrium. This is the concept that populations experience long stretches of evolutionary stability, which are occasionally interrupted by rapid bursts of extreme physical change driven by sudden environmental shifts. Establishing a variable speed timeline didn't dismantle the core mechanism of natural selection. It simply refined its rhythm, proving the theory was robust enough to align with hard geological evidence. By successfully integrating genetics and paleontology, biology finally outgrew its origins as a descriptive hobby. It transitioned into a hard science, capable of explaining exactly why physiological and behavioral phenomena occur across different species. Today, neo-Darwinism is an urgent, practical tool on the medical frontline. When doctors observe colonies of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, they are literally watching genetic mutation and natural selection happen in real time. The exact same mechanics dictate how viral strains mutate, survive treatments, and spread across global populations. We rely strictly on evolutionary biology to track and combat these microscopic threats. Ultimately, this scientific framework displaces our own perceived status in the universe. Humans are no longer positioned above a static creation. We are thoroughly embedded with nature, governed by the exact same biological rules as the bacteria we fight. Darwin's legacy functions as a living biological operating system, one that continuously adapts to new discoveries and reveals the infinite, evolving beauty of life.